Hi everybody, I'm Sarah Bersini of thefreydapron.com, and I'm here to talk about one of my favorite topics, which is lactofermentation, and it's all about vegetables today. So when fermenting vegetables, there's really two methods you want to be thinking about. The first method is the crush method, where we're going to be using salt to extract the natural water from cabbage. And any vegetable that's high in water content works with this salt crush method, but not every vegetable is good for this purpose. So that's why we want to also talk about the salt brine method, where we're simply adding salt to water in order to encourage fermentation. So I'm going to start with coring my cabbage, because when you're working with cabbage, you don't really want the core in there. It's got too much fiber. So I'm going to quarter it. That's going to make it a little bit easier when I use the mandolin slicer. And the mandolin's just for shredding. It's much easier to work with a vegetable that has little tiny pieces rather than a whole vegetable. You don't really want to stick a giant piece of cabbage in a jar and expect that to work to get all the water out of that. So here I have my mandolin slicer. Now I would recommend a Japanese mandolin because it doesn't have the legs, but we have this one today, so that's going to work. And I'm going to use kosher salt with my ferments because kosher salt is cheap. You can use sea salt, but be aware that sea salt does weigh more than kosher salt. So you don't really want to use the exact ratios I'm giving you today for the sea salt. I'll go ahead and include the ratios you need for sea salt on the website, thefreydapron.com, about fermenting vegetables. This is why I'm doing this outside, because I make a big mess. Okay. Now there's a few basic principles with fermentation that you want to know, because it's really easy to ferment just about anything, but the most important thing in getting the fermentation right is the anaerobic environment that you're going to create, which is basically a fancy way of saying an oxygen-free environment. And we're going to do that with water. Now I want to show you exactly what this looks like, because it can be a little bit confusing if it's your first time fermenting, or if you've had a fermentation experiment where you've had a little bit of yeast formation on the surface of your kraut, or some mold even. Then it might be because your vegetables are pushing their way up in the liquid, and that can easily be dealt with a proper weight on top of your vegetables. Okay. Now, with the salt crush method, it's very important to know the weight of your vegetables, which is why I have a scale. You can also just weigh your vegetables when you're in the store. I went ahead and weighed this cabbage. It came in at about 1494 grams, which is close to 3 pounds. So the ratio you want to know for working with cabbage, in this case, is about 1.3%. So 0.013 multiplied by 1494 grams gives us 19 grams of kosher salt. So I have my scale. Turn it on. My kosher salt. And 19 grams is about 2 tablespoons. 1 tablespoon is about 10 grams. Okay, so I'm at a little bit of extra salt's not going to kill you. So I'm going to add a little extra. And now this is the whole method right here. It's good to use a big bowl because you really want to work the cabbage. The enzymes are going to break down with that salt, and we're going to get a ton of liquid that we're going to use to actually submerge our cabbage underneath it. And this is going to take a while. You really want to work it. This could take you, 10 minutes, or you could always weight it down and then come back and you'll have your kraut ready to put in the jar. Now, a little bit about lactic acid bacteria. What is it? Tiny little microbes live on your cabbage. You don't really want to scrub your cabbage too much. You don't really want to worry about sanitizing too much with fermentation, because the beauty of lactic acid bacteria is that they can survive when the bad bacteria can't. So a little bit of salt goes a long way in preserving and protecting you from those harmful bacteria, and so does that anaerobic environment. So it's actually safer to eat fermented cabbage than it is to eat raw cabbage. So you're really not at risk. You don't need to worry about sanitation the way you do with canning. So in my opinion, fermentation is kind of an introduction to food preservation. It's a lot easier to wrap your mind around than, say, canning or pickling. So I want to encourage you to embrace it and just be adventurous and try it. I went ahead and added a little bit of caraway seeds and some juniper berries that I picked here in Arizona. We have juniper everywhere in the desert. So I am pretty happy with this. The liquid amount is insufficient at the moment, but I know that with a little bit of time, more juices will release, and I'll just go back and I'll push it all down and just check on it for the next hour. But I have another weight here, so I'm just going to kind of see if I can weigh everything down to create that oxygen-free environment. Okay, so that's pretty good. Perfect. Now, just to keep it like that, the way I want it, I'm going to use the lid method this time, and I have my little stopper. Okay, so now oxygen can come out, but it's not going to come in, and we know that when we have an oxygen-free environment, we're discouraging bad bacteria from growing. Meanwhile, the lactic acid bacteria will not be affected by that anaerobic environment. They don't care. They're just going to do their thing. They're going to digest the vegetables. They're going to create a byproduct of lactic acid, which is going to taste delicious. We'll be doing a salt brine method for fermenting some asparagus. And I have a 2-quart container, so it's 8 cups of water. And with 8 cups of water, I already know the amount of salt I'm going to need. So I'll go ahead and add my water to, okay, there it is, right at the neck of the bottle. And I want my kosher salt. Okay, half a cup of kosher salt. I'm going to show you a trick. If you don't know how much brine you need, just cover your vegetables with the water. Dump that water back out, measure it. I already have too much water. No big deal, I'm just gonna have a slightly too salty brine, which is fine. See how flexible we can be with fermentation? It's not an exact science, it's kind of an art. I'd be more concerned with not enough salt. Okay, so getting my asparagus in there, like so. And I'm going to want to weight them down. So I can either use a bag of water, plastic bag, sealed, to kind of shove in there, but I don't really have a lot of room. So another way you can deal with that is with a couple of wood sticks. You can cut to fit inside of your bottle and then just kind of shove them down in there. With asparagus, it's not really, they're going to be able to move past the wood, so I would say it's better if you have something that takes up more space. So I'm going to go ahead and stick with my bag here. All right, so the purpose of what I'm doing here is to create an anaerobic environment. So I'm going to deprive the bad bacteria of oxygen, and it's just basically gonna sit like this for about 2 weeks, and I'm gonna check on it after about 10 days to see if I like the flavor. If it's sour, it's a pretty good time to stop the ferment, move it to the fridge, the flavor's gonna develop. But if it tastes pretty salty, go ahead and let it continue to ferment. The ideal temperature for this fermentation process is about 72 degrees, but it can go all the way up to about 78 degrees. Just know that it's going to affect the time and length of your fermentation. And now you're on your way. You know everything you need to know to get started fermenting vegetables galore. So check out the freightapron.com fermenting vegetables post for a complete guide on everything you need to know about fermenting every type of vegetable. Thanks for watching.